Hey, it's Rod Yates. Welcome to another episode of Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode, I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned. And my special guest today is Australian singer-songwriter Ben Lee. Given that he'll celebrate his 44th birthday in 2022, it's crazy to think that Ben has been part of the musical landscape for 3 decades. As a 14-year-old, his band Noise Addict was plucked from a Sydney garage and championed by acts like Sonic Youth and the Beastie Boys, introducing Ben to a worldwide audience and setting the platform for him to launch his solo career at the age of 16. Since then, Ben has forged a career that can best be described as eclectic. He's released a children's album called Ben Lee Sings Songs About Islam for the Whole Family, co-written a musical called B is for Beer, released a covers album paying tribute to the alternative acts he loved as a teen. He made a largely instrumental album inspired by his experiments with ayahuasca called Ayahuasca Welcome to the Work, and then there were the hit alternative pop records like 2005's Awake is the New Sleep. Add into that mix Ben's forays into acting, his quests for spiritual enlightenment, and his work as a death doula, and it all adds up to one of the most colourful careers in modern music. The good news is we cover it all in this interview, but we started by talking about Ben's upcoming new album, his 20th, which is called I'm Fun. You've said it's quite an important album for you because in some ways it distills, I guess, your DNA over the past 30 years, taking in, your pop element, your spiritual element, the psychedelic element. It's kind of all coalescing and making sense in this record. Is that how you feel about it?
Yeah, when I was writing it, I was thinking a lot about artists I admire who made their best work in their 40s and onwards. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about Leonard Cohen and Tom Waits and Lucinda Williams and Bonnie Raitt, and thinking about what was it that allowed them to touch this rarefied space of being more artistically vibrant than ever in what some would consider late in their careers, even though in your 40s, you're middle age. It should be at least in a middle stage, but that's late for pop music,
Yeah.
And I realized there's just this beautiful thing with all those artists where they'd stopped pretending to be young. They were very openly carrying the wounds of an actual life and an actual career. But the energy was the energy of like a teenager who was just starting.
Right.
And when you hit that, I realized like that's the sacred space. You know what I mean? Like that's the space. It's like when you're wise enough to know better, but dumb enough to give it another shot. And so I just realized that for me, I guess you could phrase it as I had a lot of explaining to do. I think in 30 years of my career, I'd won and lost my audience so many times because I was never very calculated I never looked at it like the way a CEO looks at a business of like, how do we grow responsibly? How do we bump up from this venue to the next? Like there are so many musicians who are way more savvy about conservative and steady growth than I was, So I just sort of, I thought, well, this is my chance to explain the coherent philosophy that lies behind a seemingly eclectic career. And that is that like, I've always done what seemed fun to me at the time.
Right.
And when you understand that about me, you understand a lot, that even the weird shit I've done, I did it because I wanted to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's enough. I never needed a much better reason.
Yeah. But you feel the need to explain now?
I think it's not the need to, but it's like having the opportunity to.
Right.
Like I think what I noticed was in 2020, particularly Catch My Disease and We're All in This Together, songs that were 15 years old had a sort of resurgence and took on a new life because they seemed to have some context for people within the pandemic. And so I knew there'd be eyes on me to a degree. It's not like you can go, oh, the next record's going to be a hit.
Right.
But I knew that like, okay, the door of opportunity was somewhat open. And in pop culture, it's very fast moving. The odds of having a career a decade in, 2 decades in, let alone 3 decades in, are incredibly slim. And I think the one thing I see in artists I love, whether it's like Bob Dylan, David Bowie, Jay-Z, is allow me to reintroduce myself.
Okay.
You know, and that's a beautiful thing. It's not responsibility. It's saying that like, let me take you to where I stand now.
Right.
And that's cool, man, because like you can't be presumptuous and assume that everyone's keeping tabs on every tweet you do or every TikTok video or something. It's like you need to encapsulate it and go, let me remind you why I'm a valuable contributor to a cultural conversation.
Right. And you're doing it with the perspective of age now as well, which you mentioned earlier. When you think about a song like Arsehole, for example, where it's very self-deprecating and quite humorous as well. Is that the kind of song that you could only write from the perspective of your age now, where you admit that as a young person, you were probably a bit of an asshole and maybe smidges of it still pop in today?
Yeah. And I think, but what I didn't want to do is write this like, I'm now a sobered up individual that sees clearly and I'm very responsible. It was really important to me in that song that like, to say that line, when I was younger, I was an asshole. And I forget what the line exactly, but something about like, and some days I feel proud.
Right.
Because when you're a young upstart, you're meant to be a disruptor. You know, when I look back at the complete recklessness with which I made certain decisions or lack of decision making, I go, how appropriate for someone in their 20s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I look at the immense responsibility of like, you know, like these CEO type pop stars like Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran, who, you know, they're doing an amazing job running these megalith international corporations, basically.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of room for recklessness.
Right.
You know, and to me, I didn't want my youth to be a youth of conservative choices.
Mm-hmm.
There's time for that. There's time for that when you have kids and grandkids, and you can then like, yeah, be the nice grandpa, the eccentric, friendly grandpa that your kids can bring the kids over to or something. But when you're in your 20s, you got to fuck it up, you know?
So what were some of the reckless decisions that you look back at now and go, wow?
Primarily, I think not holding the platform or position that I was given with a sense of preciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when I did Catch My Disease on David Letterman. So Letterman, you know, he, I guess, holidays on Martha's Vineyard, and Martha's Vineyard, the indie radio station there, was always very supportive of me. So they were one of the stations that really gave Catch My Disease an initial push. And he heard it and he came back into work after the holidays and he was like, book this guy. I love this song. And that's quite an opportunity, like even to get booked on the shows, let alone to have Letterman ask for you.
Yeah.
I texted all my friends who were in town. I was like, you want to come and sing backing vocals? Half of them couldn't sing. We didn't rehearse it. We rehearsed it once in the dressing room. I watched it back that night. I was like, I didn't hire professional backing singers. It's like I didn't even place people in proximity to the mic based on their vocal abilities. And I'm just like, what was I doing? That is insane. I didn't. So there's this double thing of like, I can't believe I didn't seize the opportunity more, because I'm actually pretty good about seeing opportunity in my life. Like you can't have a career for this long without understanding how quickly the doors of opportunity open and close, you know, and you walk through it. But at the same time, not realizing, like the assumption I had that it would come around again is just remarkable and foolish, foolhardy in the way that only a young person can be. So that kind of thing. I mean, my career is peppered with those things where I did not make decisions with any type of gravity except what would be fun for me.
Yeah. And that ties in with the title of the album? Is that-
Well, see, the thing is, like, then you get to a point, like for me, now I'm, like, I think what happened in around 2005, despite myself, became a consistent professional entertainer. Like there's a kind of thing where like you do it enough times and before long, you're not going to be able to do a bad show anymore because you just know how to do it, you know? So like you start off and it's like, man, it used to be a crapshoot. Like when I did a gig, it was like, it could be great or it could be horrible. It seemed to me like it was literally just like flinging a handful of sand around me and just like seeing what I hit, basically, you know. But so around like 2005, something like that, I became like consistently decent as a performer. And I don't know, it just sort of like, I guess I took the long way. Mm-hmm. The long way is to not do it intentionally.
Right.
But you end up in a space where it's like suddenly even spontaneous decisions can be pulled off better because your sense of quality control becomes innate.
Sure.
So it's like, I don't need to think anymore about can that person sing before I put them on. I would never even pick up the phone and ask someone who can't sing to come and do backing vocals now. It's like...
There's a line in Asshole towards the end of the song, which I really like. And I think you're addressing your daughter in it. And you say, let your dreams fill you with struggle and fury. Let your world be strange. Even if later you realize you're an asshole, it's never too late to change. Is that what you were like as a kid? Were your dreams filled with struggle and fury?
Yeah, man, totally. And that's what I mean. Like they should be. Like, you know, I come from punk rock, and punk rock is all about the year zero idea. Like, nothing of importance existed before this present moment. Burn all of it down. We're starting again. That is a rare type of fire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And later you develop an appreciation for history and that you're standing on the shoulders of giants, and you know what I mean? And even in punk rock you are. That's the thing, you know?
Yeah.
But so, yeah, that is a particular type of fire that I look back on, and, you know, I have two choices. When you have a youth built on burning things down in that way, you can either beat yourself up about it and think of, oh, where could I be in my career had I had a different approach? But maybe it'd be worse. You know what I mean? Maybe whatever cultural capital I've built up with my audience and with the public now is built through a strange fascination with the way I've actually done things.
Sure.
And that it has been different to other people. So, yeah, like I do think that living with passion, even if you make odd choices, is better than, you know, ultimately it's the Pet Shop Boys song, right? We were never being boring.
But even before your career, when you were growing up in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, did you have that attitude then? Did you have, regardless of whether it was your dreams, or did you appreciate that youth is for the living? It's for those sorts of decisions.
It was never about youth for me. It was life is for the living. You know, it was that let's do it. It was just let's do it. It's like, it's just having fight in you.
Yeah. And
you can't breed that or pretend that's there in a place that it isn't. And you'd better not pretend it isn't there in a place it is. You know, if you're a fighter and you have that sense of stakes, like for me, it was about, I want to be around geniuses. I want to be around creative people that get me off. Like I'd read about like the Beat Generation and how Burroughs and Ginsberg and Kerouac and Neil Cassidy were hanging out together. That wasn't like one talented person and a bunch of hangers-on. It was like a bunch of talented people in dialogue about what can we do to culture? Like how can we disrupt things?
Yeah.
Like I wanted to be in those conversations, and that's all I wanted, to be honest, and love, you know? Like, and so the stakes were very high. It was like, I wanted to be around brilliant thinkers.
Was that instilled in you from a young age? Was that from your parents? Like, where did that attitude come from?
Well, my parents were smart. You know, there'd be a lot of like interesting conversation around the dinner table. Like my parents were involved in the Labor Party and like unions, and like there was a good sense of like social justice and like liberal politics kind of going, you know, left-wing politics going on. And I think I realized what was instilled was that being around smart people was really important. So yeah, I think when I got involved in music and art and culture, I wanted to be around the smartest people, what I perceived, because obviously everyone's very interesting.
Sure.
But I liked that Allen Ginsberg line, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked. Yeah. I was like, yeah, bring me the starving, hysterical, naked. That's what I like, you know.
Just quickly about your parents again, though. Were they creative? Like, what drew you? Because I believe your grandmother, I think, pushed you, or not pushed you, but she gave you the opportunity to learn piano.
Pushed me, yeah. They were creative, but they were more like, I think neither of them grew up in an environment where they were encouraged to think of creativity as like an asset or an option. So I think they injected creativity into everything they did. And certainly they were like solution-oriented people. So they were very involved in charities and different types of initiatives, you know. So that is creativity, I think. Yeah, they were fun.
Yeah. Was your mother an actor as well?
No. My mum was involved in like New South Wales Health,
right?
Like helping like get health information to immigrants and refugee communities and Aboriginal communities. And she was sort of like, like a sort of a health educator within government.
Gotcha. Okay. Another theme on the album is, I guess, being weird and embracing that and getting older and getting weirder. Again, going back to your youth, was that something that you identified? Were you weird as a child? Did you embrace that early on?
Look, I think it's sort of, it's funny, I had this moment that sticks in my mind where I was in kindergarten. So I would have been 4 or 5 years old, and I'm climbing up a jungle gym, and there were these 2 girls behind me in my grade, and they were arguing about which one was going to get to marry me. Great ego boost, And I turned around to them and I said, "Girls, I can marry you both." And they both looked like really happy with that solution. And I think what struck me in that moment was lean into unique solutions.
Early lesson.
Yeah.
Early lesson.
And that also, like, weird is, what's funny about the word and what's fun about it is it's completely subjective.
That's right.
Right. And it's funny how now with, me and my wife have this podcast, Weirder Together, and we're helping, we've done variety shows called that. Well, I like that name, Weirder Together, because there's a paradox in it, in that it's weird is unique, but together is community, And I think it's just all about embracing individualism and nonconformity, but in a way that is supportive and inclusive.
Right.
Not in a way that's like libertarians who are like, just leave me alone, I don't want to pay taxes, stay out of my business. It's like, I think my vision, my kind of utopia, my personal vision of utopia is that we care for each other and we're still totally individuals and unique.
Right. Okay. As well as being popular with the ladies in preschool or kindergarten, I understand there was also an opportunity, an occasion where you performed Jack and the Beanstalk record for your class because I think your teacher had left. So were you quite performative as well from a young age?
Yeah, but it was like I didn't even realize what it was. That's what's so funny about being a born performer. And that's why, like, when I wrote that song Born for This Bullshit, that's kind of what I meant, that like the math was already done. It was like my life was leading me somewhere that involved public dialogue. You know what I mean? It's like I talk loud on the phone. I'm not a private person. Like if you catch me walking down the street, you're going to listen in on like whatever dramas are going on in my family or my business or, whatever's going on. Yeah. So like, I just think like I'm extroverted in that way. So yeah, the thing you're talking about was like the teacher had an emergency and she knew, I guess she'd heard me. I had this pantomime album of Jack and the Beanstalk, a musical, and I knew it by heart. And she said, "Ben, you sit up here and you tell that story to the kids." And it was literally like, I mean, isn't that what performance is? Like basically like our world doesn't meet our needs. So we have performers to babysit us for a little while and entertain us.
We'll be back with more from Ben after this break. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with Ben Lee. You mentioned earlier the punk rock spirit and your love of punk rock music that you had at an early age. And a couple of years ago, you released that tribute album, Quarter Century Classics, where you covered bands such as Sonic Youth and Dinosaur Jr. How do you think those acts and growing up around that and loving those sorts of music, how do you think they informed you as an artist and the way that you wanted to run your career?
I suppose the two biggest things was that in 1991, Nirvana started breaking internationally. And I was, in 91, what was I? I was 12, 13, What you see going on, the messaging you get from culture at that age is irreversible. And the messaging I got was do your thing and it can take over the world. Like that was the message. It was like, so you can never forget it. If you live through a moment like that, it's just like, I mean, probably people have had similar experiences, young people now with Kanye or something, just seeing the force of will of the creative spirit, how much it can change the material world, Yeah. So I got that. And then the other thing was that Nirvana, the Beastie Boys, Sonic Youth, all of these artists took cultural curation really seriously. Nowadays people call it gatekeepers, but I don't think the Beastie Boys ever saw it as gatekeepers. They saw it as, let's bring shit that we're into with us.
Right.
And that's curation, right? That's the same as someone making a good playlist on Spotify. And for me, what the message that sent was both the responsibility and the opportunity of any kind of platform that you get. That it really is valuable in terms of what else you can do to change culture besides your own personal artwork. Your own personal artwork is going to have the impact it's going to have. But when you look at someone like Phoebe Bridgers is a young person now who's kind of like they take it really seriously because like people that come from alternative culture understand that very few people get given that mantle by the mainstream. And so I just grew up with that, you know. So I've always taken things like which support acts I take out, who I collaborate with. It's like a really amazing opportunity. And that's a value system that came from like 90s indie rock, basically.
Yeah. And it's so interesting what you were saying earlier about, you know, having a mantle or having an opportunity, and yet you were quite reckless with some of the choices. But in those acts, you saw the importance of having that mantle as well.
Well, I was reckless with like my own personal choices. Right. But in terms of like people I took out on tour with me, I think I was always kind of careful with that. I was like, who do I like? Who do I want to give an opportunity to?
Sure.
And also, who do I want to learn from? Like support acts you take out, they're generally artists who have a fire in them from a certain part of their career that you might have lost contact with. And you can vibe on that, you know? It's like that Radiohead thing they said, like, they were making fun of Madonna, like bring on the fresh blood or whatever.
Right.
Bring on the new blood. Because, you know, as you get more established, you can lose your hunger. And I think staying connected to young people in that first few albums part of their career it's vital.
Yeah. Has that happened to you where you've lost connection with that hunger?
Not in ways I even understood. But yes, I think looking back, and I think certainly, yeah, because, you know, once you're on your 10th album, your 15th album, you kind of know that even if you make a dud record, you'll probably still have a career after that because you're working on volume at a certain amount of time. You know, it's like, and that can make you just like lose your ambition a little bit.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I think when I started seeing the way like Georgia Mack or Mallrat or Amel and the Sniffers or Shamir or Christian Lee Hudson, like the seriousness with which they were thinking about their next record and the fight they had in them, I was like, I want to, you know, it's like you get competitive too and you're like, let me show these whippersnappers who's boss. No, but it's like you get inspired.
Yeah. And you brought some of them into this.
Yeah, because it's like you want to, because they're also like, it becomes like, who are your spiritual peers?
Right.
You know, and for me, what's I like better about the younger generation is I grew up in a very tribal time with music where like when I had Mandy Moore on my record in 2006 or 7, that was seen as like indie rockers were like, ooh, he's going pop or whatever. Whereas now everyone does shit like that. It's like now there's no rules anymore.
Yeah.
And so I am much more of like, it's almost like this era now is like my moment culturally in terms of that I feel aligned with even like TikTok. Like I'm like, that's what I mean, like born for this bullshit. Like I feel more connected to the zeitgeist now in a way than I've ever have.
Right.
But it's funny that I had to rock up as a 40-year-old that when the era before where, you know, like my favorite band, Pavement, I was pretty convinced with probably good reason that Steve Malkmus, like I was not quite cool enough for him. And that's fine because that's how he makes everyone feel. And that's his great gift. But that's because it's from a different time.
Sure.
You know, where there's like the rules of what it was to be cool were different.
Yeah, okay. Going back to Nirvana, what you were talking about earlier, you saw them at the big day out. What do you remember of that gig?
I just remember the simplicity of it, you know, because I'd seen like Motley Crue and Warrant and, you know, a lot of bands that like put on a show in a certain way.
Yeah.
And then I'd seen like Sydney punk bands like the Hard-Ons and I'd seen the Welcome Mat and Smudge and, you know, like those bands you didn't expect to put on a show because they were like your Sydney kind of local heroes. But seeing an international band having this moment that was just like 3 people standing on a stage doing it and the audience going nuts. Like in moments like that, you're also falling in love with what the artist does to a crowd. Because it's like, yes, Nirvana were Nirvana, but it's also like what they inspired that's inspiring. You know, I am one of thousands of artists that Nirvana lit the spark in.
Right. And lit the spark to the point, I don't know whether this is legend or whether this is fact, that your first band or the first band of some profile, Noise Addict, was literally formed the next day?
Yeah, basically. Basically, I came back from that big day out and I'd seen the scope of, you know, from like the Violent Femmes to the Hellmen to, you know, everyone who played that, to Nirvana, to Welcome Mat. Like, I just saw that, like, that world, it wasn't rocket science. If you wanted to be part of it and you wrote a song that had a verse, chorus, solo or bridge, double chorus, end, and you had some volume and it was melodic and it had kind of a fun title and you jumped up and down on stage, you could be there. You know what I mean? It was like, we're not talking about astrophysics. And so I just sort of, it felt possible.
Yeah. But I mean, there are bands who have that combination but don't get anywhere. Whereas Noise Addict just seemed to gather momentum. You did the demo, you get signed to Fellaheen Records, you end up working with Grand Royal in the States, you know, I guess the tastemakers du jour back then, and Sonic Youth are championing you. I think you even got up on stage and played with Sonic Youth at Selena's. Were you just thinking this is easy?
Well, it's weird because all of that stuff starts becoming about something different, which is how people respond. And I think there was an element where obviously, like, I had the DNA of understanding what songwriting was, even in its crudest form. I think you could listen to like anything I've done from way back and gone like, this guy understands how to write a song. So the delivery of it was very crude. But so I think there was that. And then there was the attitude, you know, and attitude is, you can go a long way on attitude. And I think the chutzpah and the idea that like, okay, this guy's writing these songs, but who does he think he is? Like, this is so crazy. Because I was 14, I was tiny, like my voice hadn't broken yet. I was tiny and I was delusional. Like, I thought our early demos sounded like Appetite for Destruction or Pink Floyd's The Wall. Like, I didn't understand how, like, I was actually delusional. Like, it was pure fantasy life. But sometimes that's what you're selling. Sure. You know, and in a way, if all art is aspirational, I think what I represented was the aspiration of courage, you know, and people going like, wow, if I had that courage, this is what I'd do with my life, something different, you know?
Yeah.
The courage to try it.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a lot of like what fed that fire in a way.
Yeah. Did you believe the hype? When you, I mean, as you mentioned, you're 14, 15, you're making this music and you're getting the respect of these people who you saw up on stage, perhaps only a year earlier as heroes, if that's the right word. It must be difficult to keep your head on straight. Did you find it so?
Well, it's a very long journey to do with that. That's an evolving journey still for me of how I perceive what I do. And, you know, the reality is as an artist, you have moments where your talent seems so obvious to yourself that you just look at the world going, how is everyone not digging this? Like, I just don't know. Like, I remember moments of being on tour where I'd be playing a gig and I'd drive through the town in a taxi and see people not going to the gig and just be like, how could they be doing anything else tonight? You know what I mean? And then you have moments where you feel like a complete imposter and you see no value in it and you can't believe anyone's at the gig. And you look at the audience and you go, I dislike you because of the very premise that you are here watching me play. Like, it's like the Groucho Marx, like, I wouldn't want to be part of any club that would have me as a member. Yeah. I would not want to be friends with anyone that would like me as a musician. So you have all these different ups and downs and vacillations and, you know. But yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, that isn't the primary thing that's keeping you going though. Like, the primary thing is the desire to express and the probably delusional hope that if you can express something perfectly enough or elegantly enough or melodically enough or loud enough, there will be some type of moment where you feel understood.
Right.
you know?
I think delusional is it's not necessarily a bad thing at that age. If you can harness it and, turn it into what you turned it into, there's obviously power to delusion.
Well, all new ventures have madness in them because you're literally imagining something that doesn't exist. Like when someone opens a shop, they're walking down the street and seeing an empty retail space and they're imagining something with customers that don't exist, with products that haven't been ordered or made, or, it's like, it's madness.
Yeah.
But our great, as a species, our biggest asset and our biggest flaw is that delusion.
Right.
Because we've brought things into existence like symphonies and beautiful architecture, and we've whittled things out of wood that are just like, oh my God, they're breathtaking. And then we've also created things that destroy us and destroy each other. So our imaginations are so powerful. And I would say that at the moment, it's sort of looking like it's more bad than good. Like we sort of are going to invent ourselves out of existence. But the beautiful thing about us is because we're using the imagination and because our specialty is bringing something into existence that also wasn't there, I have a lot of faith in plot twists because we seem to constantly surprise ourselves both horrifically and pleasantly.
Yeah.
And so I see it as the artist's job to create atmospheres and to promote the message that we can do things we haven't done before.
Right.
Because I'm not going to solve climate change, but someone in my audience might.
Right.
And if I can give them a little bit of courage and make them feel like, okay, this guy, with everything that went against this guy is standing on a stage after 30 years. This is a very unlikely story, That might give someone courage to pursue their own unlikely story, which might be positive in a way that we haven't anticipated.
Yeah. You talked earlier about the vacillations, I guess, of self-belief and then also almost self-hatred in terms of your art. Throughout your career, you've shown a great interest in spirituality and healing. Have they been a response to those vacillations? Have you just trying to find something which is concrete or something which you can latch onto or give understanding to what you're feeling?
I mean, I think there's many layers to why people go on quote unquote spiritual journeys and exploration and all that. In certain ways, I'm like thick-headed or stubborn, and I could have had a smoother ride had I been able to accept certain things sooner or more elegantly.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, being a musician, I'm 14 years old. The coolest, smartest cultural curators in the world scoop me up and go, you're one of us, come for the ride. The smart thing would have been to just be like, yeah, okay, I guess I am, because you probably know better than me. But I hadn't chosen it yet fully for myself. So I had to grapple with that, like for many years of like, should I be doing other things? Should I be? And I still think you can do other things, but there's now a simplicity in my acceptance of myself of like, I guess I am because I am. I don't know. It's like songs keep coming. I like to play the guitar. People like to hear me sing a song on the guitar. Who cares? Do I really need any more information than that? So that was sort of a struggle that I wasn't ready to renounce yet. And so in a lot of ways, I think my spiritual journeys were like a search for community. And again, my community came and got me. I didn't need to go looking for community. I could have gone, oh, it's the offbeat thinkers. It's the creators. It's people that want to move culture and have fun doing it. That's my community. It's show business, baby. But I wasn't ready for the simplicity of it. So I had to complicate things. And that's how I think the journey is for a lot of people, philosophically, romantically. Like often we go all the way around the world to come back to basic truths about who we are or what we need.
Sure. So that spiritual quest was, when you say you complicated things, that was the complications you're talking about?
I think so. Like for instance, with gurus and teachers and all that, you're looking for someone to give you answers to something only you can answer. There couldn't be a better example of overcomplicating things than finding a guru and saying, let me follow your method for attaining inner peace, when no one can tell each other that. Inner peace is inner. I mean, it's like it's in the word. So, yeah, I think I just wasn't ready for the simplicity.
Okay. Again, this may be a story of legend, but one of the gurus who you visited, I think in the early 2000s, and please forgive my pronunciation, but Sakti Natayana Ama?
Something like that.
Something like that, right. He was actually partly responsible for Awake is the New Sleep. Is that right? He promised you a top 10 album.
Yeah, but look, it's not fucking rocket science. Like, this is the thing about gurus, how they manipulate, is they're perceptive about people. And they can see, they're really good studies of people. All they do all day is people coming in front of them and expressing their innermost desires and fears and asking for guidance. If you're an intuitive person and you have the experience of that, you become highly attuned to giving good advice, basically, right? What gurus do is they give you good advice and they take credit for the results. So, okay, let's look at it really. Like, I'm me, right? Someone I met when I was 23 said, make music. Make people happy with that music. Spread joy through your music. It will be successful. Congratulations. Mike D told me that 10 years before. You know what I mean? Like I just think like gurus are basically, they're like therapists with PhDs in manipulation.
But you brought into it at the time.
Absolutely. Because I also, like I said, I wasn't ready for the simplicity and the trust of saying it's true because I feel it.
So when you look at, all the variations you've had in your career, particularly even in the last 6 or 7 years, your albums with Josh Radnor, your children's album about Islam, the stage musical B is for Beer, incredible variety of projects. And you've spoken about the fact that, you would make decisions based on what's fun for you. Doing that involve letting go of ego? Because when you have the success in Awake is the New Sleep, for example, was there people around you or was there yourself saying, right, now I've got this success, I need to keep going with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think success can make people freeze up a little bit, and it's like they get greedy or conservative because it's like, oh, that worked. Let's be careful with the next choice, which carefulness is not what brought you the success.
Right.
You know what I mean? So someone gave me very good advice once, and it was more almost business advice. But for me, it's also creative advice, which is figure out what your bandwidth is and then do as many projects. I'm just getting over COVID a few weeks ago. I'm not sick now. And then do as many projects continually as you have the bandwidth for, and those will become multiple horses in the race, right? And for me, that's 5. That's somewhere around the number. I need about 5 projects going at any given point, give or take. And these aren't all everyday projects. Some of them are ones you check in with once a week, or, it's like my garden. It's like I'm watering multiple plants. Mm-hmm. And what it does is, now this person was talking more financially, like, okay, if one of them works, you have a better odds, like one of them work, as opposed to having all your eggs in one basket. But for me, creatively, what it does is it stops you over fixating on any one of them. And that's when you start overthinking, right? So like, I learned to juggle 3 balls once because I was like, it looks kind of hard. I'd like to be able to juggle 3 balls. It seemed like the leap from 2 to 3 was worth, sorry, I'm talking too much. Was a big leap. So I was like, let's do it. And what I found was that with juggling 3 balls, if you look at any one of them for too long, you're not going to be able to, you'll drop them all.
Right.
Whereas if you just look ahead and just keep them in the air, it can go smoothly.
Okay.
So that's the way I think of sort of like my projects.
Right. Okay. One of the fascinating areas of your life, really, which I wanted to ask you about, which maybe has some association with music, but I'm not sure it does, but was your death midwifery, where you, and I'm not sure if you still do this, but I guess you studied how to help people into death? If people who are in hospice care, you would be there and help ease them into death, essentially.
Yeah, but it's like it's more like hanging out. You know what I mean? Because what are you going to do? How can you help someone die?
Well,
so it's like people call it that, but what I was interested in was basically being an active listener.
okay.
This came through my interest in psychedelics, right? Like when someone's in the midst of a big psychedelic experience, how can you be most supportive? Because you don't really want to guide, like that whole idea of like a trip guide. Like I don't really like that because people are in a very personal confrontation with themselves and they need space. But you can help someone feel held. You can be there so that when someone opens their eyes, they can touch base and go, oh, okay, you're in the room. Hold my hand. And then they go back in. So for me, that whole study was about how to unobtrusively be of support to people going through stuff. And I will tell you that where this plays into music for me is that it led me down the path of thinking that the pretense of an audience being at a show is that they're there to watch the performer. But I know myself, I think very little about the performer when I'm watching a performance. I'm thinking about myself and my life and how it applies to me and whatever I went through that day. And maybe I'm competitive. Maybe it's aspirational. Maybe I'm jealous. Maybe it reminds me, the song reminds me of something sad. Maybe, but it's very personal. And I realized that like helping someone through a psychedelic journey, helping someone die, or standing on a stage playing music while an audience is there, it's all the same thing. You're creating a safe space for people to have a personal experience. And in a way, the confidence of the performer is the person telling you, whatever you're going through right now, it's going to be all right. You're safe. Focus on me and go through what you got to go through.
What did you learn? Did you learn anything about death in those situations?
Well, this is what I learned. You know, there's nothing to learn about death because we don't know anything about it.
No, but you've seen people in that.
Yeah,
in the
but
last
it's like some
stages of
people
life.
want to watch Wheel of Fortune reruns. Some people want to like reach out to their family and apologize for things. Like there's a full menu of experiences. It's like everything else.
Right.
And what I learned was to create the space for that person to have the experience they want to have and not to dictate what that experience should be.
Right. Was it confronting at all?
I guess so, but that's my taste, you know?
Last couple of things just about I'm Fun. I think the purposeful typography of the album title, I'm Fun, it's in capital letters. There's an exclamation mark at the end of it. You're leaving people in no doubt that you are fun. Are you telling it to yourself or are you telling it to the audience?
Well, I think to me, there's a subtext to it because I'm also a pain in the ass, and that's obvious. You know what I mean? It's like I'm a demanding person. Like I'm a demanding person in pop culture. I'm a demanding husband. I'm a demanding friend. I'm annoying. So the question is, okay, then what's fun? What is fun? You know what I mean? Or what does he find fun? Or what is fun? And for me, the answer is I'm full tilt. That's what's fun. And to me, like where we started talking about what was my attitude to life as a kid, it was like, let's do this. Let's make mistakes. Let's fall in love. Let's mess it up. Let's build it. Let's burn it. Let's do it. And I'm brave, you know, and that's what's fun. And at the end of the day, not being afraid to participate is what's fun.
Right.
And that's really, I think, what sort of is the thesis, I guess, of the album.
Okay. And when in Born for This Bullshit, I think the line that you sing is, I'm still singing.
Yeah. I'm still here singing this song. It's like, you know, I can't help it. And I mean, this is what's amazing about this thing we call destiny, that like, you can't help it and you can. Like, you can't help it, but you can drag your feet. But it's fun when you start to run, when your spirit and your body wants you to run.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's fun.
Yeah. The song Crooked Tree is one of my favorite songs on the
Thank
record.
you.
And lyrically, it looks like a laundry list of rumors, presumably about you. Was that when you says, you know, here he takes LSD in his tea or words to that effect? Is it a laundry list of rumors that you've heard about yourself?
Yeah, somewhat. And it's like, it's a mixture of rumors I've heard about myself and rumors I'd like to hear about myself. But it's really about just the idea of, being a different type of parent. It comes from a story that Tom Waits told where his kids asked him why he wasn't like the other dads. And he said, in the forest, there were all these trees that were big and strong and straight. And one day the loggers came in and they chopped them all down. And the one they left was the crooked tree because they couldn't use it for furniture.
Right.
And I loved that. And I just, so the chorus of that song is like, girl, your daddy is a crooked tree. And I don't need anybody looking at me. I don't need everybody looking at me. And that's the vibe, that like celebrating the uniqueness and realizing that in areas you might have felt rejected by the mainstream actually become your strengths.
Right.
And here I stand 30 years into my career going, wow, being a crooked tree really worked out.
Right. What is the favorite rumor that you've heard about yourself?
I don't know. I'm not even sure. I mean, I guess in general, like, I think I don't know about a rumor, but a misunderstanding of myself, a profound misunderstanding, have been people who don't understand my sense of humor.
Okay.
Like people who think I'm really serious all the time. It made me realize, because I have this Andy Kaufman side that's like, yeah, I like when people don't know if you're joking or not. There's something, that space is enjoyable for me.
Right.
And I kind of realized I'm like a little too good at it sometimes because there have been so many times I've been being humorous where people thought I was being 100% earnest. And so I think I had to telegraph a little louder that I'm fucking with you guys, okay?
Just to finish up, Ben, Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit is due. Are there people you'd give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
I mean, so many. Steve Pav, he was the first person who gave me that first gig opening for Sonic Youth. He was the first person who vouched for us in a sense, and that opened up a lot of doors. I don't know. And currently, there's people helping me now, like Flanny, who runs this theatre called Largo. He's been an amazing friend, a mentor over the last few years. And my wife, Ione, is just, at the end of the day, the person that I feel like my whole life was leading up to collaborating with her on creating a universe together.
Sure.
And so, yeah.
Nice. Ben, thank you for that.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to Ben for his time and thank you for listening. Just a reminder that Ben's upcoming new album, I'm Fun, is released on August the 19th. If you have any feedback on the show or suggestions on who you'd like me to interview, or even if you just want to say hello, please drop me a line at humansofmusic@jaxsta.com. That's humansofmusic, one word, at Jaxsta, JAXSTA.com. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, next time you need to know who wrote a song, who produced a song, who engineered it, who played on it, who sang on it, who did anything on it, head to jaxsta.com for all your official music credit information. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.